Like and subscribe for endless entertainment. Our story starts off with Hajime waking up in a cave. He begins looking for an exit but sees an adorable rabbit who goes on to test if all dogs go to heaven. Hajime trips and catches its attention, but it sees a gorilla and tries to run away, only to get multiplied and is now added to the food chain. Hajime tries to do the race but gets disarmed while the gorilla does a taste test. He opens a hole into the wall and begins backing away while putting up barricades against the gorilla, until he gets knocked out. He wakes up over a healing crystal and begins to cry. Hajime remembers that he was a part of a dungeon party, but he was very weak and had to be saved by a Monogawa. They see a crystal in the wall, so an adventurer goes for it and activates a trap that brings their party to a room filled with many high-leveled monsters. The party begins getting attacked, so a knight casts a barrier that gets easily broken. Hajime uses powers to form a wall from the bridge and tells them to escape while he holds them back, but the monsters begin to break through. The adventurers launch an all-out attack, so Hajime starts to retreat, but one of the spells targets him. He realizes that someone betrayed him as the bull comes down and destroys the bridge around them, so he falls into the abyss below. It's revealed that he was brought to this world with all his classmates to protect it, but he now decides to survive and smoke anyone who stops him from going home. Hajime sees a wolf in the distance that tries to add him to its diet, but it gets caught in his trap and is buried alive. He tries to eat the monster but begins feeling unimaginable pain while his body mutates and turns him into a badass. Hajime wakes up under the healing crystal and realizes that his stats have all increased, along with giving him access to his victim's ability while drastically improving his earth transmutation skill. Hajime uses all his knowledge and channels America to make pewers along with some bullets. He tests it on Bugs Bunny and brings it back to eat so he can gain its abilities. He decides it's time to hand out karma to the gorilla. It uses Fury Swipe, but he dodges and jumps in the air to aim like a stormtrooper and gets knocked down. Hajime throws a flashbang to disarm the monster and does a taste test in front of it. The gorilla dashes at him but gets the shock of his life, leaving Hajime to blow its mind. He gets up and decides to leave the abyss. He realizes that he can't climb up, so he tries to go down to find another route. He encounters a lizard that petrified his lamp and his stub. It crawls over him to get a flashbang along with a full course of America. On the surface, it's revealed that after Hajime fell into the abyss, Kaori tried to jump in after him, but they knocked her out and brought her back. Shizuku goes outside to practice and explains that when they were first summoned here, the Pope told them about a war between humans and demons. But when demons learned to control monsters, they wiped out the majority of humanity, so they were forced to summon heroes to fight for them. She notices that her classmate is acting nervous and goes over to question him, but he leaves. She goes back over to Kaori, who awakens from her coma. She asks for Hajime, but Shizuku tells her that he's in heaven. Best Girl tries to go find him, so Shizuku embraces her while she grieves for her loss. In the abyss, Hajime finds a door, but he has no idea how to open it. He tries to transmute it, but the door blows him off and summons two Cyclops to fight him. He gets a bullseye on one, so the other begins to block. Hajime continues to pew-pew him until its shield breaks, so it attacks him but earns a one-way ticket to heaven. He finds some balls in the monsters and places them inside the door so it can be opened. He goes inside and finds a cube that reveals a prison sentence. He walks away from the charge but begs him to release her because she was betrayed by someone. He goes back, so she explains that she is an unkillable vampire that protected her people, but one day her uncle overthrew her and sealed her in this abyss. He decides to transmute her prison and breaks the seal to free the vampire. She embraces his arms and asks him to name her, so he chooses to call her Yue because she reminds him of the moon. Spikes suddenly come from the wall, so he takes one for the team to save the immortal vampire. He pulls out the spikes and looks up to see a scorpion. He puts Yue on his back and starts blasting while dodging its poison, then throws a flashbang so he can reload. He uses dash to take the high ground and blasts him, but it does no damage. He lands on the ground where the lawsuit comes off his back and begins to suck out his fluid. Yue goes towards the scorpion and unleashes the sun to crush the monster, but it wasn't enough to take it down. Hajime asks her to do it once more and runs off. She drops another one so Hajime can go above it to solve the problem the American way. He begins to take out the crab meat while Yue reveals that the labyrinths were created by the messengers of gods who rebelled against their masters. So Hajime decides to try and find one to help them escape. He creates a railgun from the monster's loot box. They begin to traverse through the labyrinth together while they continue to go further down. He tells her that he plans to get stronger and one day go home, but Yue says she no longer has anywhere to return to, so he offers to bring her to his home when he goes back. They hear a rumbling in the distance and begins to run away from a herd of T-Rexes, but sees that flowers are controlling them. He escapes into a crack and goes to look for the mastermind behind the flowers. He sees an entrance to a cave and runs through the tight hole, then fills it up. They see pollens flying through the air, so he puts up a wall but notices that Yue is now being controlled by the flowers. He runs from her, but the pollen hits him. A caked-up vegan walks towards Hajime and holds the unkillable vampire hostage. She spawns a flower on his head, but it has no effect on him, so she uses Yue to fight. Hajime remembers that Yue is immortal and disarms the creature before showing it something mind-blowing. They set up camp where he offers to give her food, but she comes over to him and decides that she wants to feed on something else. Our duo finds a staircase that leads to the lower levels of the dungeon and begins to travel through unknown territory until they find a door. They enter the room and finds it covered with pillars along with another door at the end. A giant circle appears in the center of the room and spawns a hydra. It uses many different elemental magic on them, but they dodge and begins to serve it some pain. The white head heals all their damage. Yue launches a fireball at white, but the yellow takes one for the team. The black one goes in front of her and uses genjutsu. So Hajime goes over to blast the monster and brings her behind a wall. He feeds her with a potion to bring her back, but she's been traumatized. Hajime decides to catch a case and tells her that they will survive to go home together. Yue goes over to summon a storm to distract the monster. So Hajime can get close enough to charge his rifle and give 3 of the Hydra heads an outer body experience. The other 3 comes forth, but Yue cast an ability to give them a shocking surprise. Hajime begins going over to her, but White gets back up and decides to use Hyper Beam on the immortal vampire. Hajime takes one for the team and collapses on the floor. The Hydra launches another attack, but she uses a shield to protect them from the shower of death. She gives him a potion in the most normal way possible and takes his pure to run towards the monster. She jumps over its attack and pews him in the face, but White uses another hyper beam to blast her away. She crawls over for the weapon while the monster decides to fire at the immortal vampire. But Hajime saves her from taking no damage and tells Yue to suck out his blood to bring back her magic. He runs at the monster and begins pewing the ceiling, then throws grenades inside. He dodges its attack and detonates the boomers to bring the ceiling down on the Hydra and traps it under the rubble. Yue takes this chance to unleash the sun and give the creature a one-way ticket to hell. Hajime collapses, so she goes over and lay beside him as the doors finally open. He awakens and finds himself definitely going to prison. He gently wakes her up and she explains that after the door opened, she carried him inside and began to dress his wounds. They steal the fallen angel's stuff and begins wandering around ruins until they come upon a loot box in a chair. Hajime walks across a circle and activates a spell that brings forth a recording of the angel. He congratulates them on surviving the trials and downloads all the truth of the world into his mind, where he realizes that the fallen angels were actually doing good. He reveals that he has learned ancient magic, so he now has access to creative mode. They bury the angel and discovers a spell to take them to the surface. But Yue shows him that if they continue to conquer the labyrinth, they could find a way to return to his home. Months later, Hajime has built a new arm followed by 2 new rooms and a few more hole makers just in case. Our favorite duo goes to the teleportation circle and leaves to begin a new journey on the surface. Meanwhile, the adventurers go back to the bridge where Hajime fell into the abyss. A magic circle begins to spawn as the bull comes forth, but this time they will not run. Emanagawa uses Getsuga Tensho to cause the bull to charge, but Jimbro steps forward to hold it down while the knight fails to do damage, so Shizuku shows him how it's done, while Emanagawa goes in to give it a pinprick. The monster jumps at them, so they cast a barrier, but Kaori support magic comes in clutch to help push it back to make Hajime finish it off with his final attack. They begin to celebrate, but Kaori still seems to be unhappy. Back on the surface, Shay waits for someone, but a T-Rex with an extra chromosome begins to chase her. The furry climbs away as a portal channels to summon Hajime and Yue to her location. She runs towards them and sticks the landing, but they choose to ignore her. The very special T-Rex roars at them, so Hajime shows it the spirit of America. He teaches the furry social distancing, then allows her to explain that her people are about to be wiped out by monsters and reveals that she has the ability to see into the future. He summons his vroom vroom and heads towards the furry tribe. Hajime decides that he will use her as bait so he can no-scope all the monster, then gently introduces her to the floor. Shay shows them her tribe and travels with them until they find another furry tribe that peacefully accepts them into their village. The tribe asks Hajime to train them to become stronger, but they have no idea how to fight. Hajime tells them they're gonna become a prison wife if they don't turn into alphas. Shay trains with Yue and distracts her with trees to sneak behind her for an ambush, but Yue dodges and turns her into an ice cube. She goes over to Hajime and boasts about her progress. Shay asks to join their party and reveals that she's fallen in love with him as the furries came back but are now savages. They take him to the great tree where he sees a pillar. He places the ring inside and is told to come back once he has gained the 4 labyrinth relics. He decides to leave the beast men, so they beg him to join his party, but he tells them to train so when he returns they're strong enough to join him. Then they leave the forest carrying the caked up furry along with them. Our party searches for the entrance of a labyrinth, but Shay feels the need to water the rocks and accidentally finds the opening, but they don't know how to get in. Until Shay trips inside the hidden entrance. They begin to fight off monster that scares the fluid out of Shay. Then walk through the labyrinth and encounters an Indiana Jones trap that deactivates magic, so Shay takes care of it. They walk through many rooms with traps that our favorite bunny takes care of. But in the end, they find themselves back at the start. They wander around until they encounter the final room. They decide to send in Shay to test the waters. She goes in as the armor begins moving, so they begin destroying everything until they reach the door. Shay opens it so they can escape the armors, but they encounter a fallen angel. She asks why he wants to conquer her labyrinth, so he tells her that he just wants to go home. The angels decides not to help them, so Hajime shows her the light, allowing Shay to break her arms so he can introduce some lead to her chest. The angel rises again and drops Legos on them. Hajime dodges the attacks while holding his harem and comes behind her. He grapples to the angel and knocks her to the floor so Yue can freeze her in place. Hajime uses a device to penetrate her with a rod, but it wasn't deep enough, so Shay comes in to push it deeper and destroys the core. Yue gives Shay a good girl pat, as the robot turns on and warns them that if they learn all the ancient magic, they will become the enemies of God, and passes on to another world. Our party enters the final door and is surprised to find the angel still alive. Shay goes over and hand out punishment, then they enter the circle and learn gravity magic. She hands Hajime her ring, but he goes over to kindly request that she gives him all her shit. After getting robbed, the angel flushes them down her toilet, but on her way down Shay sees a fugly fish that scared her. They arrive on the land, but Shay drinks some water, so Hajime goes over and tries to give her CPR. Seeing her chance, Shay begins eating his face until he finds the strength to push her off of him. They go to an inn and try to get a room, but Shay and Yue begins arguing about who should sleep with Hajime. Then she shouts in front of everyone that she wants Hajime to be the first to clap her cheeks, so he decides to bust a few rounds in her. The next day they meet with the guild master. He gives them a mission to rescue a noble's son who went missing in the mountains, and after a little extortion Hajime accepts. He rides his vroom vroom and begins to get excited about stopping by a village to eat some rice. At the village, Hajime's teacher and classmates work on the farm. They decide to take a break and have some lunch when Hajime with his harem suddenly walks in. The teacher gets up and goes over to meet her student. He tries to leave, but she won't let him, so he starts eating while ignoring all her questions. The teacher gets upset, so the knight comes over and scolds them for eating with a furry, then forks around and finds out that he's not bulletproof. Hajime tells his class to forget that they ever found him and threatens to isekai anyone else that gets in his way. He begins cheering up Shay, and Yue reveals his deepest secret and says that he pets Shay's ears while she sleeps. They get up and leave the teacher at the restaurant. She goes home and decides to bring him back, but Hajime already solid snaked into her room. They sit down and he decides to tell her the truth of this world. Long ago in the Age of War, a group of people found out that their god was just using them as entertainment, so they tried to overthrow him. But the god turned the people against them, so they were massacred, forcing the few who remained to create labyrinths and give whoever overcame their trials knowledge and power. She questions if he'll fight God, but he refuses because he just wants to return home. The teacher tells him that Kaori always believed he was alive, so he warns the teacher to watch their backs because there is an imposter among them who tried to send him to heaven. Our party sets out on his adventure and sees the teacher is gathered with her students to join them. He tells her no, but she says that after this adventure they will leave him alone. He summons the vroom 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 and goes off into the mountain. They exit the harem carrier, where Hajime sends out drones that scatter into the forest and finds a battlefield filled with many broken weapons. They travel up the mountain until they find a waterfall. Yue pulls off a Moses so they can enter and find the missing noble inside. Hajime gently wakes him up, but the noble begins freaking out because a dragon smoked his party. Hajime embraces him and says that he shouldn't mourn for them but continue living on while remembering their sacrifice. They exit the cave, but a sudden wind blows them away. The dragon appears in front of them and uses solar beams, so Hajime summons a shield to tank the attack. He begins to struggle, but his classmates comes in clutch to hold it off. Yue uses gravity magic to knock it down so Shay can give it a pounding. The dragon gets back up and uses tail whip on Shay, then shoots a blast towards the noble, forcing Yue to play defense. The dragon charges another hyper beam, so Hajime counters with his BFG to match its attack and knock it down. He goes on the creature to fist it, then jumps off, but leaves it a little surprise. He summons the impaler and tries to penetrate it, but the dragon's too thick, so he calls Shay to come in and smash it into the ground to knock it out. Hajime grabs the spike and puts it where the sun doesn't shine. The dragon begins freaking out and begs him to pull out. He realizes that she is a dragonborn and begins to push it deeper to punish the freaky dragon girl until she submits to him. She says that she left her village to see the summoned heroes, but she stopped to have a rest. While she's sleeping, a mage placed her under a spell to attack the adventurers. The noble argues that she sent his friends to heaven, so Hajime decides to go all the way in. But Yue convinces him to spare her because she was being controlled by someone else. He decides to pull out the spike from the dragon's lap warmers, causing her to climax and transforms to her normal form. Tio tells them that a large army of monsters are marching to attack the nearby town, and reveals that she can give them a lift after a day of rest, but she can't move because Hajime was too rough with her. So he goes over and gently carries her across the floor. In the morning, Hajime begins making walls for defense while everyone else begins evacuating the civilians to prepare for the war. Night falls while Hajime admires his work. He notices that the freaky dragon has been stalking him, so she comes out and begs him to make her join his party while his harem watches. The army of monsters arrives. Hajime goes over and gives the citizens a speech that gives his teacher credit for saving them and claims that he is her sword. He summons his railgun to show them what technology can do. They begin the fight by spewing miniguns and fireworks at the poor bastards, followed by a stream of magic from Tio that she turns into a burning inferno to consume them, but Yue comes in and begins playing catch with the monsters. The battle turns into a tower defense game with the creatures standing no chance against the might of the Hole Makers. Tio runs out of magic and Hajime is out of bullets, so he takes Shay on the vroom vroom to go into combat to throw hands instead and gives them a mind-blowing experience. They slaughter all the creatures in their path until Hajime confronts the person behind the attack. He tries to run but falls off the wolf and is taken back to the village. It's revealed that he is their classmates, and he explains that when he went up into the mountain he met a demon that convinced him to take control of all the monsters so he can unalive his teacher. She takes his hands and tells him that she won't allow him to become evil, but he embraces her and put a needle at her breather. Shay suddenly jumps at them to take one for the team, so Hajime no-scopes whoever was trying to escape. He goes over to Shay, but she reveals that his teacher has been poisoned, so he feeds her a potion in the most normal way possible. Then goes over to Shay and heals her. The traitor begins bleeding out on the ground, so the teacher begs Hajime to save him. Hajime asks him if he is their enemy, so he says that he swears to be good. Hajime decides to book him a one-way ticket to heaven because he was lying, and leaves her to mourn for the loss of her student. Our party returns the noble to his home and they go to their room where Shay reminds Hajime that he promised to take her around town, but he sees that they're being watched. In the morning, Yue gently wakes up Tio, while Hajime and Shay goes out on their date. They see an aquarium and goes in to see the fugly fish. Hajime has a heart-to-heart with the unfortunate creature and it reveals that he was captured and imprisoned, so they sneak it out. They continue the date into town where Hajime senses someone under his feet. They go down and find a little one in the filth. They bring her to a room where Shay bathes and feeds her. Then Hajime comes in to dry her hair. She reveals to them that she was kidnapped and sold on the market. He carries her to the city guards and decides to leave her in their care. But while walking away, an explosion in the distance catches their attention. They head inside to see a note asking for Hajime to bring Shay to them or the little one gets hurt. So he decides to give them an ass beating. Yue and Tio sits having lunch. An explosion happens with Shay and Hajime arriving. He tells them what happened and reveals that they're gonna visit every gang until they find the culprit. Our party goes around condemning everyone they find to an early visit with God, until Hajime finds the boss and gives him a few more holes. He frees the girl and embraces her so he can bring her above the city and shows her the beauty of fireworks. He introduces the girl to the party, and they head off on the road with Shay taking the lead and giving them a view, until they reach a town. They go to visit the guild leader and gives him a note, but an adventure suddenly bursts through the door. It's revealed that he is Hajime's classmate, so he goes over and begs him to save the other adventurers left in the labyrinth. He explains that while they were exploring, they were suddenly confronted by a demon. She recognized Nagawa as the hero and asks him to join her. He refuses, so she summons monsters to knock them down, but Kaori comes in to heal everyone. They all began fighting back against the demons, but they were too strong and they were only able to barely survive the onslaught. Shizuka tells her classmate to sneak out and call for help. He reaches the knights and tells him everything that happened, but he was followed by a monster, so they send him to the surface while they hold it off. After he left, Nagawa limit breaks and manages to take down one of her monsters. The demon uses a spell, so they put up a barrier to block it, but she summons some pussycats to go over and penetrate the barrier maker. Nagawa dispels the shadow but finds that she's already gone. He gets up to get revenge, but Shizuka slaps some sense into them and they begin to retreat. The knight suddenly arrives and tells them to do whatever it takes to survive as the monster comes in to give him an early retirement. Nagawa prepares to go all out and slays another monster, forcing the demon to put up a shield, but he strikes through and goes to end it. He stops because she has a family and she takes the chance to summon a horse to knock him away. Shizuka fights it in a one-on-one, but another appears to blow her back out. Kaori goes to her with the barrier maker's assistance and decides that they will leave this world together. The horses break through the barrier, but it gets made into a shish kebab as Hajime appears on the battlefield. The rest of the party comes down as the monsters get ready to be slaughtered. The demon makes a portal, but he spawn camps the monster and begins showing her the power of America. He does a devil may cry and makes all her monsters become a hashtag. The mighty turtle uses hyper beam, so he takes out his shield and reflects it at the demon to take out the bird. Then decides to feed the great turtle some fireworks. The demon feels fear and tries to use magic on him so she can make her escape, but Hajime blocks her path and decides to kindly ask her why she tried to attack them. She reveals that someone else gave her all the monsters and told her to attack them, so he decides to send her on a journey. Nagawa begs for her life, but mercy isn't in Hajime's vocabulary. They come over to Hajime where Kaori begins crying and apologizes for not saving him. He tells her that it's all right and she begins to embrace him. They continue on their journey while Nagawa begins questioning why he had to smoke her. Hajime says that anyone who stands in his way will get a free ticket to heaven and walks away from them. They leave the dungeon, so Kaori decides it's time to go over to him and joins his party, then expresses that she loves him more than anyone in this world. Hajime reveals that he's more into prison charges, so Yue accepts the challenge to show her that she loves him more. Hajime tells Kaori that they'll be leaving soon, so she says goodbye to her old party and heads off to begin her new journey with Hajime. We find our party driving through a sandstorm in the desert where a waifu war has begun. The battle begins with Yue laying claim to Hajime along with his life seeds, but Kaori counters by saying she knows him much better than her since they were classmates. However, Yue scores a devastating blow by revealing that Hajime's sword has entered her sheath on many occasions. Miu stops the fight before the FBI comes for Hajime, and they decide to postpone the battle for Best Girl. Tio gracefully comes forward and points out that there are many sandworms gathering in the distance, but they seem to be acting strangely. A sand glizzy suddenly comes up from the desert and attempts to make them lunch, so Hajime is forced to run away, but they continue to chase after him. Kaori takes the chance to give some head while Yue is restrained by Shia's face-sitter and they're forced to put her in timeout. Hajime begins driving in reverse while dodging the sand glizzies that attempts to penetrate him. He activates a weapon hidden in the harem carrier to give the poor bastards an outer body experience. Hajime continues to drive but finds even more waiting ahead of him, so he channels the spirit of America and gives them a pathway to the gates of Worm Heaven. They see a man laying in the middle of the desert and decide to check if he's the cause of this. Kaori turns him over and sees that the man is suffering from a poison that caused his mana to overload his body. She decides to use a spell to drain all the excess mana from him, but explains that the condition will return if he's not brought in for further treatment. The man awakens and believes that he has ascended to heaven, but Hajime gently reminds him that life is not that merciful. They take him into the harem carrier where he explains that he's a duke of a city, but days ago all the drinking water was polluted with poison that causes mana overload, and seeing no other option he set out to find adventures powerful enough to get the antidote from a volcano. The duke begs Hajime to help his people, and with some convincing from Miu he decides to accept the mission to save the duke's city from becoming past tense. Our party arrives in the city of Inkaji and finds that all of its residents are gone. They meet with the duke's father and explain that they've come to help with their current situation. Yue starts off by creating a gravity square to make a hole and finishes off by filling the pool to give them a clean source of water. Yue gets exhausted and begins drinking some of Hajime's fluids, then she attempts to eat his face. They head to the oasis, but Hajime says that he senses something evil swimming inside of it. He throws in some fireworks to give it a little surprise, causing a giant slime monster to erupt from the water and starts to attack them. Yue decides to give it the cold shoulder while Tio brings in the heat, leaving Hajime to use his pure and make the creature a hashtag. They tell them that the oasis will be cleared up after a while since the monster is gone, and the Duke thanks them for saving their city. They go to the room where the sick are being treated to tell the people all that happened, and announces that our adventurers will be going on a journey to recover the cure for the poison. Kaori decides that she will stay with Miu to look after the patients, but Miu reveals that Yue touched lips with Hajime today. Kaori kindly asks him why he was cuddling her lips when they're supposed to be on a mission, while Yue emotes on her. Our party begins their journey back through the desert and hand out a taste of America to the unfortunately shaped creatures until they arrive at the volcano holding the antidote. We find the door to the labyrinth and goes inside to find a staircase that leads deeper inside the dungeon. A monster suddenly confronts our party and Shia decides that she'll face it alone. She runs at her victim and begins converting her mana into physical strength to send the poor bastard to the Shadow Realm. They enter a room filled with the antidote for the city and continue walking through the dungeon. All of our party is beginning to suffer from the heat around them, but Tio for obvious reasons. They decide to take a break and hide inside a cave where the magic duo uses their godlike powers to make an air conditioner and begins enjoying the cool air. Tio theorizes that all the labyrinths are made to test the host in many different areas, and this one is to see if the candidate can think while under pressure. Hajime begins to get distracted by fun pillows and turns around to see 5 to 25 years in prison tempting him to the dark side. Our party begins using a boat as a shortcut through the labyrinth, but sees a lava fall waiting for them at the end. But quick-thinking Yue casts a spell to save them from becoming well done. Hajime noticed that they've arrived at the end of the dungeon as fireballs suddenly begin raining down upon them, but they manage to escape just in time. An army of lava glizzies blocks their way to the island on the other side and begins launching more fireballs at them. But Hajime counters the attack by blowing its body away and destroying the core. The rest of the party begins to use their powers to send the creatures to heaven until they stop spawning. But when Hajime blows off the last glizzy, a giant laser comes from the ceiling and consumes him. He manages to block the surprise attack but takes heavy damage during his attempt. Yue rushes over to Hajime to feed him a health potion and begs him to wake up, but another rain of lasers starts falling from the sky, forcing the best girl to defend her mans with everything she's got until the light show finally ends. They see many dragons flying above them with a powerful demon at their head. Hajime begins to stand back up and questions why the demon is here. Fried explains that he learned an ancient god magic and heard a voice declaring him as his apostle, so he made a vow to eliminate everyone that stands in the way of God. Hajime wants all the smoke and they begin launching attacks at Fried. He blocks all their abilities before starting the chant to summon the power of his god to use trick action so he can teleport behind of Hajime and command his Blue Eyes White Dragon to take away his life points while the other dragons pins down his harem. Hajime gets pushed back by White Lightning but summons his Holy Cross to defend against the demon's attack. Fried suddenly gets knocked away and sees that Tio has transformed into a dragon. She launches an attack to start a Ki Blast power struggle with Blue Eyes so Hajime can get close enough to knock him off his mount, but another dragon comes to his rescue while Tio pushes the white dragon away. Hajime runs out of strength and starts feeling gravity, but Tio comes in clutch to bring him back to his harem. The lava around them suddenly begins rising and Fried explains that he has the controller to the labyrinth, so he just opened all the seals to make the volcano explode and leaves them to perish. Hajime goes to Tio and tells her to take his ring and escape the labyrinth, but she says that she's ride or die for him. He tells her that they aren't going to fall here but defeat this labyrinth instead, but he needs her to return to Akanji and give the people the antidote. He transfers the ring to Tio and she begins flying through the skies. The other dragons begins to attack her, but she feels ecstasy from the pain and flies past them into the other rooms where she begins to reach her peak. A giant explosion comes from above, but she uses the cross to block the attack, which pushes her over the edge. Tio flies past the powerful demon while leaking her love juices all over him, but he realizes that she left him a present that blows away his expectations. Tio continues to fly towards Akanji and collapses at their gate, but Kaori runs over to her friend and carries her to a room inside the city. She tells Kaori that Hajime will be fine since he has plot armor, and they decides to take Miu to meet her parents in a nearby city. Back over to Hajime, we find our party entering the final room of the labyrinth. They enter the circle to learn ancient spatial magic, and Yue finds a hidden wall with the dungeon relic inside. The room begins to be flooded by lava, but the spatial magic comes in clutch and allows our party to survive a bath from hell. Hajime goes to his ship to swim through the volcano, but they begin to get pulled down under the wave of lava. They get spit out in the ocean but finds that sharks are after them, so Yue decides to put them into an underwater blender. They go up to the surface and immediately begins eating the wildlife surrounding them. A group of fishmen comes on the ship to protect their kind and tries attacking Shia, but he becomes a skipping stone instead. They look up to see Miu falling from the sky with Kaori riding Tio by her side, and Hajime jumps up to embrace her in his arms. Hajime's harem is back together again and they are very happy to see that he made it out alright. Our party continues their journey through the ocean until they find the land that Miu came from. They go on the dock where the soldier thanks them for bringing back the missing child, then allows them to explore the city. Miu carries the party to meet her mother and runs over to embrace her in a hug for the first time since she's been kidnapped. Miu realizes that her mother had been injured and asks her father to help her, so Hajime comes over to take her inside the home. Kaori takes a look at her leg and says that she will take a few days to heal it, but she'll be fine. Rimia questions why Miu calls Hajime father, and he tells her everything that happened up to this point. She thanks them for all that they've done and invites them to stay in her home. Hajime says that he'll find an inn, but the MILF uses Miu as a weapon to make him stay and offers some cheeks as repayment for his kindness, which makes his harem less than pleased. Our party leaves Miu behind to look for an underwater labyrinth close by. They stand under the night sky, but Hajime realizes that the relic from the previous dungeon is filling with moonlight and begins pointing the way that leads to the underwater labyrinth. They enter through the opening with strong currents pulling them along, but a monster begins coming from behind, so Hajime feeds it some fireworks to send it to heaven. They find a star in the wall and use the pendant to open another door that leads to a cave inside the labyrinth. Our party begins walking through the cavern and encounters many monsters that they easily defeat. Hajime begins complaining that the monsters seem weak, so the heavens reply by forming a slime monster. Shia tries to smash it, but the slime busts all over her chest and Tio uses flame magic to burn it away. Yue puts up a barrier to block its attack and Shia comes over to ask Hajime to rub potions on her burns. But Kaori decides to heal the wound to shaft block our furry friend. They realize that the slime burns through magic and it begins to transform into the legendary monster Tit's head. It begins attacking our party, but they return the favor to the monster. Kaori tells Yue to go fight while taking over as the shield holder, and all our fighters launch a team ultimate to make Tit's head explode. The monster begins to reform into its godlike shape and they begin questioning Hajime about its mana crystal to destroy, but he explains that the whole room is this creature's weak spot. Tit's head starts attacking and breaks through Kaori's shield and Yue is forced back into defense mode. Hajime summons his flame spitter to burn the wall of slime, so the others launch ranged attacks to distract it while Kaori just stands there being useless. Hajime notices a whirlpool and decides to use the impaler to penetrate it so he can open an escape route. The party is split apart by the currents with both waifus on opposite sides. Yue tells him to save Kaori, so he swims over just in time to carry her to the surface. Kaori questions why he chose to help her, so he explains that she would not survive on her own while Yue is an immortal vampire. The duo begin traveling through the dungeon until they arrive at a level where many abandoned ships lay in wreckage. The space around them begins to warp and they find themselves in the middle of a war at sea. Hajime tries to shoot with no effect, but Kaori is able to block it and Hajime realizes that only magic attacks work in this place. They see a man in pain, so Kaori goes over to heal him, but he gets Thanos snapped instead. She thinks that she just smoked someone, but Hajime explains that everything here is just an illusion to make her feel better. They suddenly get surrounded by pirates and Hajime blows their minds and jump away with Kaori. He realizes that the only way to escape is to send the illusion men to heaven and goes to end them. The duo find themselves back in the ship graveyard and remembering all the carnage that Hajime caused, Kaori begins freaking out. They take a break and she apologizes for being weak, but he tells her it's alright because he also freaked out in the abyss and without Yue he wouldn't have made it. Kaori admits that she's jealous of Yue, so Hajime explains that even if she becomes important to him, Yue will always be the one that he loves and she should stop comparing herself to her. They start back on their journey through the labyrinth and goes to the top of a ship. Another vision begins forming and this time they find themselves at a party between humans and beastmen. The host comes forth and thanks everyone for signing a peace treaty between their races, but says that it was an act against God for humans to mix with furry filth. A red wedding begins to take place as all the guests begin to be slaughtered without exception. Hajime notices that the host went inside with a mysterious woman by his side as the illusion begins fading away. Kaori says she's alright, so they decide to continue traveling inside the ship, but Hajime finds a string that activates an arrow trap. A heavy gust of wind suddenly appears that blows Kaori away and Hajime begins to get surrounded by soldiers. So he shows them why you don't take a sword to a pew-pew fight. He begins looking for Kaori and finds her hiding in a dark corner. She comes over to him and says that she needs a hug, but he realizes that she's acting strange, then blows her mind. He sees that she had a knife and the imposter questions why he pew her, but he double taps. The creature explains that it's holding her body hostage, but Hajime reveals that magic ammo will only cause pain with minor damages, and tells the imposter that it took someone important to him, so he'll make sure that they suffer for it. The creature decides to leave her vessel and Hajime notices that it disappeared. Kaori wakes up and decides to embrace his lips with her own. She admits that she loves him and will always be by his side, so Hajime accepts it as long as she's happy. The duo begins the journey through the labyrinth and finds a portal that leads to an underwater temple with a magic circle in the center. The other harem members arrives in another circle and Tio questions if Hajime gave Kaori his long sword, but he awards her with punishments. Kaori flexes on Yue that she kissed Hajime and he admitted that she's important to him. Yue accepts her as a worthy rival and they go into the magical circle to learn ancient restoration magic. The fallen angel tells them not to follow the way of God and leaves them to collect the fourth ancient relic. The temple begins to collapse, so Yue uses spatial magic to teleport them away, but a giant wave washes them underwater where they see that the legendary Tit's head have returned. It begins to attack and Hajime comes up with a plan to beat it, but he needs time. Tit's head evolves into the Great Swallower, but many fishes suddenly attacks the monster as the fugly fish arrives on the battlefield to lend a fin. While Hajime completes his missiles, then launch them inside the monster to turn it into fireworks and brings an end to the Great Swallower. The next day, Miu goes into Hajime's room to wake him up along with Yue, who seems to have misplaced her clothing. Everyone gathers to have breakfast around the table and Hajime decides to leave, but he can't bring himself to tell Miu the bad news. They go outside to play tag with Miu and she runs away to take home field advantage by hiding in the water. But when Shia goes to check on her, she gets a surprise as Miu steals her heaven holders. Rimia goes over to thank Hajime for taking care of her daughter and tells him that Miu will understand when he decides to go without her. Hajime says he'll tell her that he's leaving tomorrow and Rimia gets closer to show him why she's the throat goat, but his harem sensed the danger and came to put an end to it. Miu suddenly returns to give Hajime Shia's top, so the rest of his harem decides to donate their milkshake carriers to a noble cause as well. Later in the day, Miu gets the news that Hajime will be leaving soon, but she takes it like a champ and says that she'll wait for him, so he promises that one day he will come back with all his friends and introduce them to her. The next day, Miu gives the entire party good luck charms to keep them safe and Miu embraces Hajime in a hug before he leaves her behind to continue his journey to return home. We go over to the demon capital where we find Fried giving a speech to his army of monsters and begins a mass invasion of all the territories that humans have claimed for themselves. Inside the Knight's commander's office, he begins questioning why his soldiers have been acting suspicious and write letters asking Hajime for help. He hears a knock at the door and Daisuke enters the room to tell him something important. He starts to act very nervously as another knock comes at his office and the commander opens the door to find that one of his soldiers have been brainwashed. The knight goes over to divide Daisuke by two, but the commander manages to hold him off and begins casting magic. He gets stabbed in the back as Daisuke reveals that he's a rat bastard. The commander questions why he betrayed him and summons a tornado to blow everyone off. He tries to slay the traitor, but the knights come in to protect him, so the commander begins fighting a 4v1 to style on all his soldiers by putting them down and winning the battle flawlessly. Daisuke gets up from his ass beating and revives all the guards that were defeated before calling the rest of the knights to start flooding into the room. Seeing no other option, the commander decides to make a strategic retreat through the window and gets ready to blast them, but he's stopped by a mysterious woman who uses a spell to take the remainder of the commander's life points. We head over to our party traveling on the road, but they come to a stop because they see a group of people being attacked by bandits. The barrier around them begins to break apart and Hajime puts the harem carrier into gear so he can channel the American spirit to give the bandits a few extra holes in their bodies. They come to a stop so Kaori can go over to heal all the injured people that fell in the battle. It's revealed that it was the princess who created the barrier and she is introduced to Hajime, but he questions why she's all the way out here and she reveals that the kingdom is in trouble. They take her in the harem carrier where she explains that after they left with Kaori, the king suddenly started supporting the Holy Church and labeled Hajime as an enemy of God. But he started to see her as an enemy as well, so she went to seek out the teacher and saw when she got kidnapped by a nun from the church. After seeing all this, she decided to run away and seek them out to ask for help. Hajime tells the princess that he'll go save his teacher and send anyone that gets in his way to the Shadow Realm. The teacher sits in her cell while thinking about the god of Riz, so the heavens answer her prayers and send Hajime to rescue her. He opens a hole inside the prison and goes inside to take off the bracelet that the wardens attached to her. The teacher goes over to Hajime and tells him that she now knows why he had to smoke his classmates and thanks him for saving her. But he says that he made his own decisions, so she shouldn't blame herself for anything he does. They hear an earthquake in the distance and Hajime notices that an army of demons has begun attacking the capital. A flash of light comes towards them, but Hajime teleports away before they become past tense. The mysterious woman reveals that she is God's strongest apostle and has come to remove Hajime from this world, but he's ready for all the smoke. We go over to our favorite harem where they realize that the demons have started to attack the kingdom, so Yue and Shia decides to go out to deal with Fried because of what he did to Hajime. They go over to Tio and ask where the dragon commander is hiding, but Hajime contacts the horny dragon and asks her to come over to take his teacher to safety. A portal opens that obliterates the tower they were standing on, and Fried joins the battle to face off against them. He commands his Blue Eyes White Dragon to attack, but Yue uses her reverse Uno card to give his soldiers a one-way ticket to heaven. Yue begins taunting Fried, so he decides to take her in a 1v1 while the flying penguins deal with Shia. He uses tackle on our furry friend, and she decides to use spatial magic to kidnap all her future victims. The demon reveals that the red-haired bad bee they faced in the labyrinth was his lover, and he hates them because they put her on a t-shirt. But Shia explains that it was simply a skill issue and she doesn't care who they smoke to keep Hajime safe. He begins to attack, but the furry uses Future Sight to dodge all their spells and delete them from this world. The demon tells them to start using long-range attacks, but Shia summons a new weapon and comes in like a wrecking ball to knock the mutated penguins into sleep mode. The demon tries to surprise the rabbit with Future Sight and gets balls pushed in his face, but manages to land some attacks to make Shia hard. She uses restoration magic on herself, so the demon goes up into the sky to use lightning attacks and finds out just how OP seeing into the future can be. Shia ends off the fight by bondaging the demon and decides to introduce him to the floor. She flies down to the crater where the demon calls our furry a monster before taking his last breath, but she takes it as a compliment. We go over to Yue, who is facing off against Fried. She calls down a dragon from the skies, but the Gok Gok turtle sucks it in and fires back the spell towards her. Fried says he has prepared for all the bullshit she can pull, but Yue takes it as a challenge and uses all her power to summon the 5 elemental dragons. They begin to deep fry the turtle before slaughtering all the demons that are unfortunate enough to be close by. After seeing the hacks, Fried starts to use his Age of God magic to summon a nuclear bomb to wipe out everything that exists around him. Yue manages to survive that attack, but she gets penetrated by Blue Eyes. She reminds us that she's immortal and uses full counter to make Fried feel unimaginable pain. And he decides to sacrifice his remaining dragon so he can make a strategic retreat back to safety. We find Hajime fighting against Noit while trying his best to protect his teacher. She uses a spell to spit some heat, but the Holy Cross saves them from seeing Jesus. A song begins playing around them that begins to debuff all of Hajime's skills. He points out to Noit that fighting him is pointless because her kingdom is being destroyed by the demons. But she says that her god doesn't really care about the people who worship him. Hajime asks if she could get rid of him by sending him back to his own world. And Noit reveals that she won't do it because her god wants to see him suffer before he takes his last breath. She launches an aura sphere at Hajime that manages to break through his barrier, but Noit suddenly gets her back blown out against the wall as Tio arrives on the battlefield. Hajime gives her his teacher to take to somewhere that's safe while he stays to face off against the apostle. She uses flamethrower again, but he dodges and takes out his Gatling to push her away so he can swap to his sniper to try and put holes in her. Hajime goes in for a no-scope and finds that she's too strong, so he sends the Holy Cross after her, but she easily destroys all of them. Noit uses the Speed Force to get behind our MC and destroys his sniper. Hajime is forced to activate his limit break and begins to match evenly with God's strongest apostle. He realizes that if the fight continues like this he will lose and sees that she has a mana crystal inside her body. Hajime calls his remaining crosses to blow away her expectations, but both fighters survive the gender reveal party. He takes the chance to throw some discs at her, but Noit easily deflects them. He surprises her by pewing through the portals until her weapons break apart so he can bondage her with his magic rope. While she is held in place, Hajime uses the impaler to try and penetrate her body, and with a lot of effort he brings an end to this hard-fought battle. Noit congratulates him on winning before falling down into an abyss to never be seen again. He sees an explosion in the distance and goes over to see that Tio and his teacher are standing in a ruin. They explain that the teacher was trying to boost Tio's magic breath but ended up obliterating the church and sending everyone inside to the gates of heaven. The teacher begins crying, so Hajime goes to embrace her until she starts to feel better. Tio shows them that a monk is watching them and they decide to follow the stranger through the destroyed city. He points at a heap of rubble and lifts it to reveal a magical circle hiding underneath. Our party enters the portal and gets transported to a labyrinth where they begin to explore and step on another magic circle to gain ancient spirit magic. Hajime goes over and finds out that to defeat the dungeon they just needed to have no faith in God. Then he takes the relic of the labyrinth for himself. We go over to Shizuku, who is awakened by a sound outside the castle. She starts to investigate but finds that the rest of her classmates are also on edge. They go over to Amanagawa's room and find that they may have interrupted a very special moment. He decides to wake everyone inside the castle to find out what caused the explosion. When a totally not brainwashed maid runs over to report that the demon army is approaching the capital, Amanagawa decides to evacuate the kingdom. However, Eri tells him that it would be better if they meet up with the commander to find a way to defeat the demons. They go to the guard room and is told that they'll soon be meeting with the commander. The captain begins giving a speech to all the soldiers and takes out an orb that turns into a flashbang to signal the knights to begin slaying all the students that are too weak to defend themselves. The maid runs towards Shizuku while asking for her help, but she takes the chance to penetrate her back and pins the best girl to the floor. Eri is revealed to be a traitor and takes off her glasses to prove that she's truly evil. They restrain all the hurt students while Eri goes over to Amanagawa to place a dog collar around his throat. Then the crazy blind bitch attempts to eat his face. Eri tells Shizuku that she did all this to make Amanagawa hers so they can live in this world happily together, but Shizuku questions what happened to the guards. Eri explains that everyone in the castle was secretly sent to heaven and she used her necromancy skill to control them like puppets. She decides to give a demonstration by walking to her defenseless classmate and command the guard to give him an extra hole so she can use her magic to bring him back to this world as her servant. Shizuku calls her a monster, but Eri reveals that she plans to turn her into a servant and force her to smoke Kaori. She takes the sword from the guard and gets ready to make another victim, but a barrier stops the attack and explodes to push her away. Kaori arrives on the battlefield to save her classmates and goes into a trance to cast her spell. The princess defends her from the attacking soldiers, but Daisuke comes over to them and acts like he's innocent so he can get close enough to knock out the princess before going over to penetrate Kaori with his hole maker. The best girl uses her remaining strength to complete the spell and heal all of her injured classmates while her body goes limp. Amanagawa rises up on full demon time and commands his sword to return to him. He uses Getsuga Tensho to distract the guards while the rest of the class begins to free themselves so they can join him in the fight against the traitors. Amanagawa uses another Getsuga Tensho to clear a way to Eri, but he gets blocked by the revived form of the commander. Amanagawa can't bring himself to slay his old friend, so he gets overwhelmed by him. He suddenly begins to feel very sick and Eri reveals that she gave him a little present while she was tongue wrestling him earlier. The crazed bitch begins walking towards Kaori and casts the spell to turn her into a servant. But before she can complete it, Hajime arrives on the battlefield. He flash steps to Daisuke to knock him into the wall, then takes Kaori's body and gives it to Tio and the teacher so they can use ancient spirit magic on their fallen friend. Eri gets Hajime's attention and he begins to walk over to her while on demon time. A servant tries to sneak him, but he blocks it with a barrier and blows his mind. She sends the commander to fight and he asks Hajime to help him, so he sends his friend to the afterlife. Hajime summons his Gatling and begins to send all the lost souls to the gates of heaven so they can rest in peace. He continues walking over to Eri and puts his pure at her thinker, but Daisuke tries to sneak Hajime and gets introduced to the ground. He embraces the traitor's breather and Daisuke blames him for taking Kaori away from him. Hajime decides to test if he has a foot fetish and gives the demons a meal that will surely give them the runs. A giant laser comes from the sky as Freed returns to continue fighting on the battlefield. Tio says that they succeeded in attaching Kaori's soul, but they need Yue to help finish the process. So Hajime summons an orb and uses it to call down a laser that begins to annihilate all the demons that have gathered around the stadium. He tells Freed to leave before he decides to turn him into his next victim, and seeing that he's outclassed, Freed takes Eri to make a strategical retreat. Yue and Shia arrive on the battlefield and see that Kaori has been gravely injured, so they take her body to a better location to complete the healing ritual. Hajime comes over to check on them, but Yue tells him that his teacher is grieving. He goes over to her and apologizes for sending another of her students to heaven, but she says that she accepts that what he did was the right thing to do. Hajime tells his teacher to never stop mourning for those who are lost and keep her humanity intact, so one day when they return home she can teach him how to be normal again. She goes over to him and cries for all her students that perished in this world at such a young age. We go over to the stadium and finds Nagumo finishing his training. The princess comes over to him where it's revealed that her father passed away during the chaos. She looks up in the sky and finds that our main party has returned to them, but Shizuku realizes that Kaori is missing. Hajime prepares them for her new appearance as they see her falling from the sky while asking for Hajime to catch her, but he allows Kaori to have an intimate moment with the floor. It's revealed that her soul is in Noin's body and Shizuku begins to leak tears of joy while going over to embrace the friend she thought she lost. They asked why she looks so different and Kaori explains that although they were able to completely heal her body, she chose to take Noin's vessel because it was way more powerful. Hajime decides to explain to them all the secrets he found out about this world and the corruption of its god. Nagumo decides that they need to defeat the god to save the world, but Hajime tells him that all he wants to do is find a way to go home. Our party goes inside to have dinner but finds that the rest of the class has come to join them. They begin asking Hajime if they can come along with him to the next labyrinth so they can learn ancient magic to gain enough strength to defend themselves and save the people of this land. After giving it some thought, he agrees to take them along with him, but Yue realizes that he wants them to get stronger because he can use them as meat shields. His harem begins to feed him dinner and he's forced to eat everything they decide to put in his mouth. Kaori starts getting off from eating from the same fork as Hajime, but Tio is approaching her peak from licking it. She demands a reward from Hajime for all that she did to protect his teacher, and he decides to grant her one wish. Tio tells him that she wants him to penetrate her back like the first time they met, but he refuses to do it. All his classmates begins judging Hajime for what Tio described happened and starts thinking that he's a pervert, so he decides to do as she wishes and summons the impaler to penetrate her just like she wanted. The next day everyone gathers outside the castle to take on the labyrinth in the forest and follows our party as they set out on a new adventure. A few days later, we find our party flying towards the furry forest where it's revealed that the princess also came on the ship to get a free ride to the border of the neighboring nation, though she's hesitant to ask them for assistance since the kingdom is filled with barbarians that only respect strength and keeps those who they conquer as workers without pay. Shia confirms that many of the furry clans have fallen victim to this cruel country, before explaining that when her tribe was forced to flee their home, they encountered soldiers along the way who attacked them and captured most of the survivors to sell on the black market. Our silly rabbit blames herself for causing that to happen, but the other waifus point out that it's the law which condemns all furries born with mana to be unalived, along with the Empire's culture that is at fault for what happened. Nagumo suddenly steps up to announce that they should go save the furries instead of continuing to the labyrinth. However, Hajime says that it's not their place as outsiders to change the way this world has worked for centuries, so the hero of the nation leaves the room with his head held down in disgrace. Shizuku goes outside to see her friend deep in thought. He wonders why someone with so much power would turn their back on people who desperately needs help, especially after they found out the truth about the evil god. But the sexy samurai reveals that deep into the black abyss known as Hajime's heart lives a flicker of light that has resolved to only protect those he has come to care about. They notice that the ship is changing course and returns inside to see our party watching an army from the Empire relentlessly chasing down two bangable bunnies that belong to Shia's tribe. The helpless women soon collapse to the ground while the soldiers rapidly close in on them, so the hero begs our MC to let him go down to rescue the furries. However, Hajime tells Nagumo to wait, prior to the soldiers getting a one-way ticket to the gates of heaven. We are reminded that these beast men were trained by the edgelord, so the muscle mommies feel nothing but ecstasy during the great massacre of the poor bastards that were foolish enough to follow them into the mountains. As the women desecrate the loot boxes, a victim attempts to launch a final attack at the bunny monsters, when a pew suddenly drops from the sky to make him cosplay as a used ketchup packet, and knowing that only one person can match their brutality, the psychopathic furries salute the sky to pay respect to the overpowered edgelord who is watching them with pride. Hajime descends from the sky to the shock of the normal beastmen before testing if fall damage is still enabled with the other waifus. Then they meet up with Shia's tribe where our MC compliments the war rabbits on a job well done. The bouncy bunny wonders what happened to the rest of her clan, however the young man finds it important to first reveal that soon after transforming into fighting furries, they chose to change their names to sound like something that the emo king would approve of, which are all cringe enough to make even Shia want to delete herself from existence. But they couldn't settle on if Hajime should be called the White Fang Hurricane or the Red Rando of Death, so it was decided that the boss would pick for himself. The executioner argues for Red Rando along with the Butcher and the Skybreaker, but the Swift Gale joined by the Phantom and Silent Blades show they have better taste in names because the White Fang Hurricane does sound cooler. Meanwhile, Hajime's classmates try their best to not laugh at him until our Dark Lord kindly informs them that they will pay for this in the near future. All the Beastmen gather to go on the Star Destroyer to escape the Empire's reach, where Shia's tribe explains that their camp was first attacked by a swarm of demons and they were forced to use up most of their ammunition and traps, so they went back to the Halia tribe's main base to restock, where they encountered many soldiers waiting in ambush to kidnap as many furries as possible. However, after a few rounds of merciless torture, the pitiful creatures confess that the demons sent a strike force to the Empire capital too, that managed to annihilate a lot of their people before they were banished to the Shadow Realm, so the Emperor ordered his army to capture the Beastmen in order to replace the workforce lost during the invasion. Following this revelation, Shia's father took a small squad to free the workers without pay, but soon after entering the city they vanished into thin air. Thus the Battle Bunnies decided to create this rescue team to free their commander, and while gathering intelligence they came upon the men from earlier who were sent out to capture some more furries. In a rare display of compassion, our MC declares that he will help his disciples in their time of need, though Shia insists that the labyrinths are far more important than the lives of a few furries. Hajime says that he knows that the busty bunny is lying since her ears reveal how she truly feels, prior to admitting that if Shia isn't smiling the world feels like it's lost a shining star because our bunny girl has come to mean a lot to him. The furry professes that all she can currently think about is if her family is safe, as the other waifus watch in unfiltered jealousy, but Yue who approves of his actions. Our party arrives inside the Empire, where they realize that the Beastmen are being treated like wild animals. Nagumo wants to desperately help those in need, however Hajime tells him to keep his hero complex in check unless he wants to draw unwanted attention to them. The young man ponders on how the edgelord could care so much about Shia's tribe while leaving the other furries to suffer in captivity, and Hajime clarifies that it's simply because they mean more to him than other beastmen, before leaving to go gather information. Our party begins inquiring into anything noteworthy that happened in the capital, then meets up in an alleyway to discuss what they found. Hajime discovers that Shia's tribe is being kept in the castle and decides to take the lolly with him to find out more details, though the other waifus are suspicious that the duo plans to sneak off to play swords and sheets with each other. Until our protagonist explains that they are staying behind since he's going to brutally torture the guards for information on the captives. A few hours later, Hajime returns to the group with the walking prison sentence in a much better mood, which the other waifus recognize instantly, but our MC claims it's because she drank some of his blood. They decide to break into the castle tonight to save the beastmen. However, Nagumo asks if it's possible to just get the princess to use her meeting with the emperor to free the furries as well, so the edgelord reveals that when Shia's father entered the city he slaughtered many soldiers and anyone associated with them will be labeled as enemies of the kingdom. Seeing that the hero is disappointed, RMC cheers him up by making the young man the leader of the diversion team and giving them the pivotal role of distracting the guards as he frees the beastmen, before creating some familiar-looking helmets to hide their identity during the mission, and hands out the appropriate colors to his classmates while specifically leaving the pink one for Shizuku, who quickly refuses because she thinks it makes her look weak. Hajime confesses that Kaori already told him that she's obsessed with cute things, which opens the floodgates for everyone to tell stories touching on how soft-hearted she really is, so the embarrassed samurai takes the helmet in order to put an end to the accusations before she loses her bad bitch status permanently. In the night, the soldiers rush outside of the fortress to see the Power Rangers on their walls, though they immediately suspect that it is a prank and criticize the pink one for mocking them by trying too hard to be cute. This brings Shizuku's will to live to an all-time low, while the other members of the Voltron force resolve to go down and teach them a lesson. Inside the castle, the fighting furries discuss their merciless boss who would slaughter the entire empire if they captured him, hence Hajime makes his presence known to his disciples prior to freeing them from their prison cell to get information on Shia's father. Our party approach the torture chamber where they hear the Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss reverse Uno carding his captors by pointing out just how incompetent they are at tormenting prisoners. After being traumatized by the never-ending verbal assault, the soldiers decide to take a break. However, Hajime gifts them a permanent vacation to the pits of hell and walks into the room to free the battered leader of the ferocious furries. Outside the Empire, the Beastmen are reunited with their missing family while our bootylicious bunny watches from afar, feeling nothing but relief that her people are now safe. Suddenly Shizuku attempts to penetrate Hajime for convincing them to wear the stupid mask for his entertainment, followed by the Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss, who calls over the Edgelord for an important meeting. The commander reveals that he met the Emperor during his sharp questioning and he wanted to know who transformed their tribe into such fearsome warriors, but after Shia's father spat in his face, the king declared that all beastmen who are found will be captured as pets to be used for his amusement, so now they have no choice but to go to war against the monarch. Shia protests this reckless decision, arguing that the battle bunnies would stand no chance if the Empire strikes back. Thus Hajime gently touches her special place to make the furry reach the peak of euphoric happiness in front of the entire tribe. RMC asks why they would choose to fight when their skills should keep them safe from any army. The captain admits that although this may be true, other beastmen without specialized training would suffer the Empire's wrath in their stead because his tribe made the mistake of catching the monarch's attention, and this knowledge is a burden too heavy for him to carry. Still, Hajime points out that while the captain's intentions are good, he does not have enough soldiers to overcome the capital. Shia's father admits that their plan is to make many of the court officials become hashtags until the emperor can no longer sustain the war and is forced to make peace with them, or decides to focus his entire military force on carrying out a mass genocide to wipe their race off the face of the planet, which makes our bunny girl sad since this may be the last time she will see her family alive. The commander reminds Shia that they honored her choice to follow Hajime on his journey, so she shouldn't feel remorse concerning their decision to fight for their freedom, because returning to a life where the strong preyed upon the furry tribe due to them being weak is a fate worse than death. Seeing that everyone in our party desperately wants to assist the battle bunnies, Hajime announces that he cannot participate in direct combat, reasoning that their victory should belong solely to the beast men, so the Empire will always fear doing any harm to them even after he eventually leaves this world behind. Hence, with his help, the Edgelords manifests a scheme to conquer the capital in a single night, while implanting such dread within the king that he will tremble in terror at a mere mention of their name. In the morning, the young couple discusses Hajime's evolving affection towards Shia, where the prison sentence says that she is happy that Hajime has begun allowing other people to get closer to his heart and encourages him to turn our busty bunny girl into a second wife. However, the lucky bastard clarifies that while he can no longer deny the truth, there is still only one woman who is unquestionably the love of his life. They suddenly hear Imanagawa rapidly approaching in the distance, and the lolly takes the chance to start a ditty party as everyone arrives to see that our MC is not like them, which makes the other waifus start freaking out because they want to join in on the fun too. Inside the castle, Princess Liliana greets the emperor of this nation to request aid for her people. They go into the meeting room where the princess tells the story of everything that happened up until now, so the king chooses to help his neighbors in their time of need under the condition that she marries the crown prince of the empire, and Liliana has no choice other than to accept the offer. Out of nowhere, the emperor starts talking about a group of idiots wearing stupid masks who caused a commotion last night, and interestingly one of them wielded the holy sword granted to the hero. Then while the guards were distracted, a large fluffle of the most skilled beastmen he has ever seen mysteriously disappeared into thin air. The king insinuates that Hajime's party is the culprit behind the theft, which freaks out the princess since she didn't even know he was in the city, when a guard knocks on the door to announce that Imanagawa is outside requesting an audience with Liliana. At the entrance, the captain of the 3rd Division gives our party permission to enter the fortress, though the soldier recognizes Shia from the time he spent hunting down beastmen in the past and wonders why she isn't wearing a collar like a proper pet. Shia chooses to ignore the blatant insult, so the soldier urges the hero to hand over our waifu to the empire in exchange for a harem of beautiful bunnies. However, Hajime interrupts to warn the captain that they don't have time to waste talking to trash like him. Our party convenes with the princess, who scolds them because of the prison break shenanigans that the king was referencing, and questions how they are going to explain themselves when the topic is brought up. Thus the edgelord confesses that he plans on saying that his group just arrived in the city today to visit an old friend. The princess is left stunned by Hajime's transparent audacity, prior to wondering if he plans on getting everyone in the room executed, as a guard enters to signal that it's time to speak with the emperor. Our crew goes into the throne room, where Hajime surprisingly displays respect towards the monarch, though the king tells him to drop the act since Liliana already told him about the edgelord's reputation. He invites his guests to take a seat and inquires into the powers Hajime gained from the labyrinths, but our MC chooses to keep these details to himself, which causes the guards stationed all over the room to prepare to launch an attack until Liliana steps up to stop the one-sided slaughter about to take place. The emperor tells the soldiers to stand down before they stain his nice carpets with their insides, then takes a seat at the table while wondering if he can receive one of Hajime's women as a gift. Our MC suggests taking Tio for one of his wives, though the monarch can sense crazy from a mile away, and turns his attention to Shia given that she reminds him of some very amusing pets he recently lost. The king confesses that intruders broke into his castle using a teleportation skill beyond what anyone without the power of a labyrinth would be capable of, and kidnapped a special group of furries that wielded masterfully crafted weapons that only a master synergist could make, though even confronted with overwhelming evidence, the emo king denies having any knowledge of the incident he is referring to. The king calls bullshit on this shameless lie, as a royal guard comes over to deliver urgent news, so the king invites them to stay for the princess's engagement party to his son, prior to leaving the room. This news leaves our party in complete shock, but Liliana explains that agreeing to a marriage was the only way to gain assistance for her people and convert the empire into a powerful ally instead of a threat on the horizon. Imanagawa asserts that she should be able to marry someone she loves, however Hajime says it's not their place to tell the people of this world what to do as he exits the room. A few hours later, the princess gets ready for the upcoming party. Her betrothal enters the chambers unannounced, then dismisses the maids from service, so Liliana sends her guards away to wait outside the door. As soon as they're alone, the prince grabs a handful of paradise and pushes the young lady to the floor while telling her that even if she screamed, no one would help because he is next in line to the throne. Liliana calls the sick bastard a monster, which he immediately proves by describing the multiple times women have suffered from his lust in the past, and reveals that the ones who fight back always give him the best experiences. The psychopathic prince frees her stress relievers from their bondage prior to getting ready to force open her castle gates with his battering ram, when a metallic spider falls from the ceiling to inject fluids into the criminal's breather to make him collapse on top of Liliana. As darkness falls upon the kingdom, we find our party walking towards the celebration, while the fighting furries sneak into the castle grounds to commit a great massacre against all the Imperial soldiers who are unlucky enough to be stationed here tonight. Hajime gets a report that the army's barracks have been laced with sleeping gas and the king's family has been successfully captured, thus the waifus try their best to enjoy the event before the room gets painted in red. The royal couple arrives at their celebration with the princess wearing a dress meant for mourning, and Liliana walks away from the mentally unstable freak to introduce herself to the elites of the empire. Everyone realizes that something is clearly wrong with how she's acting, so our MC casually mentions that the princess almost got her back blown out, then takes Yue's hand and lead her to the dance floor before they can ask any more questions. The young couple moves to the rhythm among the rest of the nobles, where the smooth criminal shows who is the most important woman in his life, until the princess comes over to propose for him to join her in the next ballet. Thus, after getting permission, Hajime goes off into the crowd holding Liliana. She thanks our MC for stopping the raving lunatic, though the edgelord says that he will try it again after the event is over. However, the princess resolves to go through with the wedding anyways, since the empire is still their strongest neighbors despite the sacrifices she has to make to attain it. So now Liliana chooses to spend her last moments of freedom in the arms of the man who always comes to the rescue whenever he is needed. Observing that the princess has resigned herself to a life of unimaginable torment, our overpowered protagonist admits that the prince will not leave this event alive and she just needs to depend on her friends to take care of the rest, prior to walking away to reclaim his rightful place at Yue's side, as Tio gets off on the fact that the prince is getting cucked in front of everyone. The Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss suddenly signals that all preparations are now in place to commence the operation, which causes Shia to leave our party to join her tribe in battle, while the king gives a toast to wish the young couple endless happiness during this new alliance that will be created through their marriage to bring an end to the demon race. The lights abruptly goes out, leaving the guests confused in complete darkness, when a hail of body penetrators is loosed upon the emperor. However, he perfectly parries the surprise attack, so the battle bunnies are forced to go in close to slaughter the royal guards, but the king quickly casts fireball to provide light to his soldiers, then creates a wind wall to make all projectiles useless before forcing the fighting furries into the open, where the emperor and Shia's father start relentlessly thrusting their body dividers against each other, with the onlookers watching in pure shock of the beastman's true strength. The 3rd Division rush to the aid of their king until they encounter our favorite furry patiently waiting in the hallway. The captain seems to have forgotten who she is, thus he foolishly orders his men to charge towards a certain demise, where Shia gives the soldiers the hardest pounding they will ever receive, prior to blasting the few pathetic souls who remains into the afterlife. The captain bravely charges at the furry only to immediately get his guts rearranged, which convinces him to try to beg our psychopathic bunny for mercy, but Shia tosses the Imperial soldier into the air and uses her upbeat to send the poor bastard into the blast zone. Then our curvaceous bunny smiles, knowing that she has avenged the beastmen that the Empire massacred. At the party, we find that the Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss has been defeated by the king, but he suddenly finds himself feeling weak, as sharp woods start penetrating him from behind. The hall is plunged back into darkness once again, while the furry commander walks over to give the king the antidote to the poison and tells him that today he will be reminded of his place on the food chain. Shia's father places a necklace around the king's breather that will force everyone related to him by blood to follow any oath sworn upon it, and orders the king to promise that all beastmen will be freed from being workers without pay, in addition to making it forbidden for any soldier to enter their forest forever. However, the emperor refuses the offer of peace, so the battle bunnies drags his heir into the room to give him an improv throat surgery, though this small loss does nothing to shake the king's resolve. Seeing that he chose the hard way, the tourists of terror sets off a boomers in the barracks filled with sleeping soldiers, until the monarch finally submits to the beastman's desires, and admits that because they have defeated him in battle he finds no shame in taking the vow, which makes the furry leave the castle as his people celebrates their newfound freedom. A few hours later, we find the emancipated beastmen going on the Star Destroyer to return home to the furry nation, with the Emperor now serving as their prisoner. He asks if Hajime can make a ship for the Empire in return for his daughter's hand in marriage, and this offer convinces our waifus that it would be better to use him to test fall damage. However, the edgelord wonders about the proposal with Liliana. The Emperor explains that his kingdom no longer has the power it once did 2 days ago, since the majority of their workforce has been released, so the Empire is unable to help the princess in any way, though the monarch does confide that he still has enough power to support him in marrying Liliana in exchange for an heirship. But Hajime says the idea never even crossed his mind, seeing that he already has 2 women that he loves. Our party arrives at their destination, where all the furries exit the aircraft to be reunited with the family they thought was lost forever, while the edgelord looks on with a genuine smile. The adventurers joins them on the ground and notice that the forest was destroyed when the ship landed, thus Kaori steps forward to use her restoration magic to bring the dead trees back to life, which convinces the furries that she must be a goddess from above who must be worshipped. The elf thanks Hajime for saving his granddaughter, however he says that Shia's tribe is the ones who did all the work, hence the Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss steps forward to announce that they have won a victory, but the war is not yet over as long as the beastmen can be hunted down like prey, and presents anyone who wishes to become stronger with the opportunity to join his tribe. Then the commander smiles, knowing that soon this forest will be protected by cold-hearted psychopaths. Inside the chief's home, the Emperor sits in peace, knowing that they can't harm him since he is needed in one piece for the vows that were sworn to work, prior to the furry threatening to make the king past tense because of his lack of respect. The monarch tells them that he surrendered to Shia's tribe and will only acknowledge their strength unless another clan wants to prove him wrong in a fight. Realizing that he is making the situation worse, our MC opens a portal to send the Emperor home, despite the king arguing that they are still in the middle of a negotiation, though Hajime says centuries worth of hostilities won't be resolved in one day, before gently tossing him through the rift in space. Then he looks at the princess, and sensing his intentions she begs to remain unportaled until her business in the Beastmen nation is over. The chief moves on with the meeting to show the Dark Hunter of the Forbidden Unknowable Abyss their thanks for rescuing the people who were held captive in the Empire by removing the Order of Exile over his entire tribe, then votes to give him a place on their council to participate in all future decisions. However, the commander refuses, since Shia's tribe's aim was not to save the beastmen but to rescue their squad members that were locked inside the dungeon, so they shouldn't confuse their moment of kindness for an alliance, because if they were to ever become an enemy, the battle bunnies would not hesitate to wipe them out. Our party goes to the Fighting Furries HQ, when Shia's father enters the room to ask Hajime to join him for something important, thus the other waifus insists on coming along, but Yue kindly asks the women to remain inside, while our MC is taken to Shia, who is standing in front of the tree where her mom was laid to rest. The busty bunny tells the edgelord of her dream to become a hero that protects those she loves like her mother always tried to do, before introducing Hajime as the man who has stolen her heart. Then our MC confesses that when they crawled out of the abyss he planned to live alone with Yue, but after encountering Shia he found that this world has a lot more light to offer than they believed was possible. The bunny with 2 big personalities says she would do anything to repay the kindness the edgelord has shown her, and takes him up the tree to show off the place that her mother enjoyed most in the forest, where Hajime takes the chance to lie down on some thick thighs as he falls into sleep mode. The next day, Liliana is thrown through the portal like a sack of potatoes, which shocks the isekai squad who were busy eating dinner. Then the princess starts cursing Hajime for treating a royal woman like he doesn't care, prior to confessing that her heart skipped a beat when they danced together. Our party gathers inside the furry tribe's forest to enter the labyrinth locked away inside the great tree. The Riz god places a ring inside the monolith to activate the dungeon, followed by Yue, who uses restoration magic to stimulate the plant's special place until it opens a dark hole for them to enter. Thus everyone walks into the tressy and are immediately teleported to another jungle. The hero decides to take the lead from here, as Hajime restrains 3 suspicious members of our party. He questions where the real Yue has gone, however she refuses to answer him, so the edgelord blows the imposters' minds to reveal their true forms, while the waifus wonder how he could have possibly known, but Hajime confesses that she just felt different than usual. The adventurers continue deeper into the labyrinth when our party senses a horde of monsters rapidly approaching, and the classmates go forth to prove themselves to the dungeon master. They try their best to fend off the bee drills, but the swarm easily evades the spells before overwhelming the weaklings with sting attack, which forces the main squad to step in to show the noobs how to massacre animals like a pro. After the battle, a fugly goblin walks out of the bushes, so Amanagawa goes to erase the freak of nature from existence, though Hajime kindly asks the hero to stop, and explains that the aesthetically deficient monster is Yue because he can recognize her beautiful eyes from anywhere. Kaori tries to use restoration magic, but not even the power of the gods can fix ugly. Thus Hajime gives Smeagol a telepathy stone, which allows the creature to communicate with them. Our party travels further into the forest, where they find another mistake of creation enjoying a foot job from the other goblins, and a muscular menace getting bullied by its own kind. Tio reasons that since these trials has been about testing the strength of the bonds formed between them, forcing the classmates to fight the monsters alone is just a waste of time because only those who can overcome the main challenges will gain a reward from the labyrinth. Realizing that the freaky goblin is speaking the truth, Hajime uses the people leader to commit a great genocide inside the forest, so the great tree opens its chamber of secrets once again to authorize everyone to ascend to the next level. However, as they are being transported, the Rizlord holds the mirror breakers close, which causes the other waifus to do the same to him while the circle goes off. Back on Earth, Hajime hears his alarm ringing and awakens to see Yue waiting for him to get up. Our duo commences their everyday routine of going to school, where they meet up with Shia, who smushes her stress relievers on our MC's body despite his constant protests, though for some reason the normal high school boy feels that something is slightly wrong. They head into class and Hajime continues to find his current life suspicious when Kaori points out that he's been ignoring her, so our MC actually begins apologizing until the walking prison sentence steps in to challenge the dark hair queen to a waifu war, as the teacher stands in front of the class preparing for her lesson. However, Hajime's blatant disgust causes Tio to suddenly be in need of a bucket and a mop. In the evening, our party goes to the kindergarten to pick up Miyu since Rinia is traveling for work, but on their journey home they hear a woman screaming in the distance. Shia steps forward to help the victim while the normal high school boy reaches for something that should be on his waist, though thankfully the fighting human doesn't need help to hand out some premium quality ass beating. Later into the night, the lolly tries to sentence Hajime to 25 years in prison. However, all he can obsess about is why his life somehow feels empty even after gaining everything that would make a man happy, where our MC abruptly remembers the promise he made to Yue in the abyss and gets up to knock some sense into his head, before scolding himself for falling for such an obvious trick. A-Cups protest that this world is perfectly made from his deepest desires, so the edgelord confesses that even if our allies causes nothing but trouble, the fact that they never act like he wants them to has saved their lives on many occasions, which is why this lie the labyrinth has created would never have fooled him for long. Upon observing Hajime's firm determination, the dungeon master acknowledges that he passed the trials, prior to sending the emo king back to reality, where he sees that everyone is still asleep in their own fantasies and waits patiently by Yue's side until she finally awakens to feel the warm embrace of his love again. The lolly admits that she was dreaming about ruling her kingdom from the past alongside their 11 children, but right as they were going to make baby number 1, she announces that she has also passed the labyrinth's trials, and the young couple goes over to touch the waifu's sensitive areas. Our bouncy bunny girl explains that in her vision Hajime appeared earlier in the forest to protect the furries from monsters, thus due to this no one needed to get stronger, but it felt wrong just watching from the sidelines, so she went to fight alongside him, which ended up breaking her out of the genjutsu. Then after listening to the story, Hajime hugs Shia for returning to them safely. Tio suddenly dispels the illusion too and starts running over to our MC for proper punishment. However, he hands out head pats to her instead, followed by Kaori, who is freaking out because the things she did with Hajime was so embarrassing that the waifu refuses to speak of it. The main team decides to take a break to give the classmates time to exit the stasis on their own, and soon Shizuku joins our party in reality to see the freaky healer welcoming her back, but when she spots the edgelord, the samurai immediately starts blushing. All the waifus realizes that another competitor has been born and relentlessly question the samurai about what she did in the Matrix, though the young woman wisely remains silent while she ponders about being a pretty princess with Hajime as her prince. Kaori goes towards the remaining classmates to forcefully take them out of the trial, which puts the failures in a state of shock, until Hajime advises them to lock in or their hopes of becoming more powerful will never come true. Our party ascends to the next floor and notices that this level looks just like a normal forest without any monsters. It suddenly begins to rain, so Yue puts up a barrier around everyone to expose that slime is falling from the sky, where many tentacles starts erecting from the ground in an attempt to hentai the adventurers, and everyone comes to the revelation that whoever the slime busts on gains an overwhelming feeling to bang the closest person to them no matter what gender they are. Before the video can get age-restricted, Hajime summons the Holy Cross to show Rimuru cousin the quickest way to meet Slime Jesus in person, as Yue can no longer maintain the barrier because she has been defeated by the Great Horny. Our other ally struggles to not partake in a pure carnivore-based diet while under the influence of the sticky fluid, so the edgelord is forced to restrain the classmates except for Shizuku, who somehow retains her common decency. Tio comes over to Hajime acting completely normal to uncover that this particular brand of passion potion will wear off if given enough time. However, Hajime deems it weird that she remains unaffected, though Tio discloses that the pleasure the horny juice inflicts is not even a fraction of the euphoric bliss she feels when he decides to reward her with harsh punishment. A few hours later, our MC unveils that everyone was able to overcome their desires, excluding the classmates, who apologizes for being a disappointment. Shia hears something in the distance, then goes over to have a closer look where she is paralyzed by fear. Thus Hajime walks to check on her and sees an infestation of roaches making its way towards them. Our MC gently carries Shia back to the party to reveal that thousands of the little devils are coming, and in a rare moment of genuine fear, the edgelord panics as the swarm surrounds the explorers, who attempt to do whatever they can to keep the mistakes of nature away. But luckily, the barrier waifu uses her powers to create a safe space to stop the flying terrors in their track, with Yue coming in clutch to reinforce the shield. All at once, the demons start forming into gigantic balls of horror to mega-evolve into oversized grasshoppers from the pits of hell, followed by a strange light that blinds our entire party for a brief moment. Then Hajime observes the lolly and finds himself feeling unimaginable hatred towards her, with Yue returning the same energy. Our party reasons that the magic circle inverts the strongest emotion they have for each other. Hence Tio, that's cured of her affliction, notices that one advantage is that everyone now finds the roaches cute, so the adventurers can now slaughter them without fear. The young couple takes to the skies to fight, as the idiot drops the barrier to invite the pretty insects for a free hug, though luckily Tio came in clutch to save their worthless lives. The legendary Dragonborn reminds them to stay focused on their goal of clearing the labyrinth while she holds off the swarm until her magic eventually runs out. Another wave of monsters approaches. However, Nagumo can't bring himself to harm such endearing creatures, but Shizuku insists that it's the only way to make it out of here alive. Nevertheless, the hero still decides to just wait for Hajime to come and solve all their problems like he always does. On the other side of the battlefield, our enraged Battle Bunny is pounding the bugs with maximum prejudice. While Kaori looks on wishing she was stronger, Tio commands the healer to stop comparing herself to the other waifus since everyone has something unique within their hearts that allows them to shine in their own special way. The healer wonders why the well-endowed dragon seems immune to the light's effect, though Tio reveals that she still feels genuine hatred towards our allies. But that changes nothing because the waifu has resolved to protect those she has come to care about even if it means giving up her life. Kaori suddenly perceives that Shizuku is on the verge of becoming a snack and goes to slay the vile monster. Then the best friends decide to cover their blind spots, while Tio along with Shia takes care of the bugs in the air, leaving the classmates to support the group in any way they can. The strongest duo holds off most of the horde with little to no effort, as a magic circle appears above Hajime to release more roaches, but Yue's dragon comes in clutch to attack everything on the battlefield that breathes. She rejoices that the emo king got deep-throated during the confusion, however her happiness was short-lived since he's notoriously hard to put down. All the creepy crawlies forms their favorite shape to create even more mistakes of nature, and the Epstein bug uses a sludge bomb to split them up, then immediately goes after the lolly to land an aerial ace on her, but Hajime fires his people the leader to give them a personal fireworks show. The immortal vampire is pissed that she got some karma back, though they both use their pew-pews to stop the other from getting hurt, as a wave of God's worst invention comes forth, forcing Yue to summon her dragons to eat it out, while our MC shows the monsters the power of the American spirit. However, no matter how many roaches they manage to cleanse off the face of the planet, more always seem to spawn to take their place. Hajime uses his shield to stop the creature's acid rain, yet they continue to attack the edgelord on the sides he can't protect, and this forces the lolly to rescue the man she hates the most. Pancake Chest begins casting incendios as our MC sends out space discs to enhance her spell to the point that she can wipe out all the enemies around them. Hajime questions if the prison sentence has any way to destroy them in one go, but she says that it will take a lot of time, so our MC uses Limit Break along with the Existence Eraser to shower the poor bastards in an endless barrage of pew-pews that destroys anything that comes close to his woman, until the monsters formed into a ball of horrors that renders his attacks pointless. Seeing no other choice, Hajime forms a barrier to trap the entire horde before holding on to Yue while she finishes the incantation for divine purgatory to exterminate all the little demons unfortunate enough to be born ugly, and brings an end to this hard-fought battle. Our party gathers to celebrate their success, when a glory hole manifests in the roots above to invite them to the final floor in the labyrinth. The adventurers realize that they are standing at the peak of the great tree which was previously concealed with spatial magic, then walks over to the monolith to trigger the cutscene. The elf congratulates them for enduring the difficult trials she created, before awarding those who passed with evolution magic that carries the ability to enhance any sorcery they choose, including other forms of ancient magic. However, if a person managed to combine all the spells from the labyrinths together, he would be granted the authority to access concept magic, which gives the wielder the capabilities of a god, but because it uses willpower instead of mana, it is so difficult to command that the 7 dungeon masters could only create 3 spells while working together. And for being the first person to reach this far, the elf presents Hajime with a compass that points the owner to whatever they desire, even if it may be traveling to another world, though a person would require concept magic to open a portal to that location. Our MC is shocked that his quest is soon going to come to an end. However, the classmates are worried because all of them failed except for Shizuku, until the edgelord confesses that he will take everyone home with him after they clear the last labyrinth, regardless of how useless they've been.
Like for a cat girl, subscribe for a waifu, and remember to stay swifty.